Ladies and gentlemen, this is the wrap-up session of day one. I should stress before we start this, as I mentioned earlier, we have asked our rapporteurs not to give you a presentation on what was said in the groups, and indeed, in the time we have available to give you detail of what was discussed in the three groups would be impossible. We also have asked them to do the impossible by giving them not even 5 minutes to think between the end of their session and coming on stage here. So thank you in advance to agreeing to these rather difficult terms of the game, as it were. I'm going to ask them just a few questions to get some headlines. We'll see if there are any additional comments, and then I will give the floor to Robert Jan Schmidt to close proceedings today. So, we heard in our opening session about the importance of open science as one of the key pillars if we are to open up to an era of innovation. Our three rapporteurs, let me introduce them. Dr. Sandra Collins, Director of the Digital Repository of Ireland, the Royal Irish Academy. She was rapporteur for the Developing Research Structures for Open Science session, which was moderated by Dr. Jan Erik Sundgren from Volvo Group. Dr. Thomas Cruzier, researcher at the School of Biotechnology, the Royal Institute of Technology, KTH in Stockholm, Sweden, who was rapporteuring on creating incentives and removing barriers, which was moderated by Toivo Mamets of the University of Tartu. And last but not least, Dr. Stefan Bergmans, Vice President of Academic and Research Relations EU at Elsevier, who is the rapporteur on Open Science and Society, which was moderated by Kerstin Kuhls from the Fraunhofer ISI. So, let us dive straight in. And I just wondered, in terms of the areas you were talking about, we heard in the session before the break about the public consultation and some of the barriers that were identified to open science, some of the issues of concern, the challenges ahead. Sandra, if I could start with you, what in your group did people perceive to be the most important challenges if we are to realise all this potential of open science?
Thanks, Jackie. We had loads of problems. The kind of key ones that we identified were standards, interoperability, metadata. We had a big focus on data and how to share it, how to exchange it. We identified the lack of a code of conduct. How do you build trust if you don't have kind of rules, regulations, compliance, certification? We talked about the diversity in the EU, and that's a great thing, but it's also a huge challenge and the need to work globally. The idea of sustaining services, the importance of training, and we got started, but I don't think we answered the question of cost, investment, how to sustain this.
So many challenges, but underpinning all of those, perhaps the trust issue, because if you don't have that, then the rest of it doesn't really work. We'll come back to what people said about how you build that trust, if they said anything, but let's add to that picture. Thomas, in your group, the key challenges, were they similar to those that Sandra's outlined? Very different? Was there anything really striking for you?
They're a complement, I guess. I identified like 3 major barriers. One, I think, is still the need to enable the reuse of data. It's still not there. Only 20 to 30% of data is openly accessible in papers, and to allow text mining and adapt copyright access laws, basically. Second is the lack of open science literacy. So scientists and stakeholders of the research ecosystem don't really know that open science is not just an idea, it's not just a beautiful ideology, it's a concrete response to concrete problems. And they don't know what it means in practical terms. And third, there are no real incentives to do open science, to adopt open science practices. They don't know, scientists don't really know why they should engage in these practices. And so we have to think about that, and think about that globally. It's important to think that other countries, China in particular, are going need to adopt the same policies as we are.
Okay. So the what's in it for me question at the moment, they don't have an answer to. They do not see it, and therefore finding answers to the other challenges is not seen as a priority at the moment. Okay, perhaps we can come back to how you give them the what's in it for me in a moment. But Stefan, from your point of view, similar challenges, anything that's not been mentioned?
Well, actually, first of all, I'd like to say this was a great session. I have no I mean, no plan to summarize at all what the 30 pages note I have of this. So very rich. Thank you very much for the audience and to the participants. So that said, I think it was more in terms of new things that are needed or transforming that really we talked about those challenges. And I would pick three among many other ones. One was governance. There was a talk about finding a new way of governance that is between bottom-up and top-down. So that was certainly one that was put forward. There was also knowledge. Knowledge actually is changing. What is useful knowledge? When we use the example of coastal management, where it's not only the scientists anymore that's playing, many other players are there. And the third one, when it comes to new, is new stakeholders. We've moved beyond with open science, beyond open access with only a few stakeholders involved, to many stakeholders. Of course, for our session, an important one being the citizens, of course, and how those citizens are going to get involved into open science.
So very much going back to what Professor Fogel was talking about, citizen science transforms who the players are, and we need to respond to that. So very interesting mix there of challenges, numerous. In terms of meeting those challenges, Sandra, you talked about this question of building trust. You said there wasn't a code of conduct, so how do you build trust? Was that something that people in terms of solutions wanted to see? And if they did, who should draw it up? How would it work? And other areas, what sort of solutions were people proposing to the issues you raised?
Yeah, great question, Jackie. So we had, although we had lots of problems we talked about, we had a huge amount of suggestions for how to solve them. I'm going to start kind of at the big picture. So one of the very strong messages was that there is a lot of excellence out there. So there's a lot of investment in existing research infrastructures, a kind of a let's not reinvent the wheel, let's not start from scratch, let's review and map the existing exemplars and work towards sustaining and integrating them. So that might be disciplinary, it might be nation state, how do we bring what is good already there together and integrate it. A focus that I thought was really important was a real focus on the user. So the user should drive this, not the technologies. I always think technology is easy, people are hard. Let's put the focus on the users. The services should prove themselves. So we had a really strong focus on service, where that included kind of tools and applications as well. But we shouldn't be building them for the sake of it. They should prove themselves through their use, their adoption, and that is an evaluation criteria for what's really good, what's actually working. We said we should take care with the governance model. So I think there was a need, a sense of urgency. One of our final notes was start now, don't wait, do it now, with the idea of prototyping, make mistakes, this American culture, entrepreneurial culture. So prototype it, try it, make mistakes, learn from that, have a good, strong peer review system that validates the evaluation and what should be invested in and what should be sustained. And we said one of the other really important things, I think, a solution for diversity, and that's collaborate. So collaborate across communities, across disciplines, across borders. And one of the things we focused on during the thing was global, European and global organisations that can enable that. And an example we talked about was Research Data Alliance.
Okay, thank you very much. Very concrete suggestions there. Thomas, in terms of your challenges, one broad area was regulatory. You mentioned copyright issues like that, the lack of awareness, and this crucial issue of the what's in it for me, the incentive. What sort of solutions were your group coming forward with to those problems?
Yeah, I think all panelists at one point talked about metrics. So if you are able to evaluate the researchers and the research with the right metrics, that could work as an incentive. So there's a great study that's been done on alternative metrics in the UK, and we got some nice specification of what the ideal metric might look like. So having something that's robust based on real data, reflecting a degree of humility, recognizing that the quantitative aspect of metrics is complementary to the qualitative, having something that's transparent and that's very diverse, that takes into account specificity in field. So that is going to take some time to put in place, but that's definitely something that needs to be worked on right now. There's also working, of course, on open science literacy. So there's very concrete suggestions there, including courses on open science for PhD students, having MOOCs, either at the European level or universities, and having roadmaps that are written by Europe or universities that help institutions transition into open science. And then finally, there's this theme of more transparency in general. Transparency about the policies of European Union. There's also some doubt about what's coming next, and there's some fears there. On the business side, for example, if I'm engaged as a business with public partners, am I going to have to share my data, for example? Being open about the deliverables of projects, or having a more transparent peer review system. Yeah, that's about it. Yeah.
Okay, thank you very much. Stefan, your challenges centred a lot around governance questions and the new stakeholders and so on. And Sandra said earlier, you need to take care with the governance. A phrase we heard from the consultation, the public consultation, was this really does need to be driven bottom up. It's very much a stakeholder process, not top down. Was that echoed in your group? How did people see the best way to respond to these governance challenges?
So yeah, partly, certainly. I mean, there was a lot of discussions around new platforms allowing for the societal debate to take place. And so it was really urging the European Commission, but other stakeholders also, to experiment with different types of platforms. So this was clearly one of the aspects. There was also a clear need for new instruments. So H2020 today should experiment with new schemes, actually, that will allow, for example, easiest integration of other actors, such as NGOs, but citizens also, so that they could have access with the scientists also to the funding scheme. There was the reminder of the vision paper that you've seen with Josie, the Joint Open Science Initiative, which was clearly put forward. And then one other element that I remember was the need for facilitators. So we need to have the EC as a facilitator, but also potentially new careers around this connection that's being made between the scientists, between the policymakers, as well as the citizens. So that's a third one.
Thank you very much. Just in terms, and staying with you for a Stefan now, and I go down the line with this one. We heard about your urgency, and the Commissioner said at the beginning, we need action, not words. In terms of what emerged for you as the most important, if we were looking at ingredients for this new European Open Science agenda, if you had to identify from the group, and then I'll give you a chance to give me your own sense of whether you agree with that or have something else. What do you think the most important priority will be to realise the potential of open science? So the group perspective first, if you would. Stefan first.
Well, I think it's clearly for us, because it was open science and society, was the involvement of the citizen.
Yeah.
And how we will be able to integrate them in the research, in the research cycle. And again, it was not put forward as the citizen needed it, in all levels. Yeah. I think there was a clear mention of the slide that was showed to us earlier today with the various levels at which citizens could be involved, actually.
Thomas.
I think. Yes, the idea of having alternative metrics came over and over again. But I think this is about the clear action items here are working groups and thinking about it and experimenting little by little. So I think this is a little bit more down the line. I think one suggestion that I heard that I like is, and that could be done right now, is making data usable. So the idea that putting a PDF out there on the web is not very useful because there's not enough data attached that explains what's included in it. So metadata, for example. So do what's necessary to make your data useful.
Thank you. Sandra.
I'm going to say two, because I can't pin it down to one. One, we said again and again, the speaker said Magna Carta for data, Bill of Rights, good conduct around the data. And then the other one is this idea of knitting together the excellence, the good tools, the services that people are using now, and the integration activity. So the understanding across the different disciplines, across the different research infrastructures, and bringing them together rather than starting again somewhere else. else.
Thank you. I'll give you a chance in a moment to give me your own priority, but before I do that, and very briefly, does anybody, a moderator of one of the sessions, or anybody here think, hang on a minute, I made an utterly brilliant point this afternoon, I cannot think why our rapporteurs have not mentioned. I should stress, by the way, ladies and gentlemen, again, everything you say, I think Stefan said he had 30 pages of notes, everything you say has been captured. Any burning points from any of our moderators or any of you before I ask our panel for their own personal priorities? Please. Just press, yeah.
Jan van der Biezen from Philips.
Hello.
What we've heard so far is mainly impacting research in academia and universities and institutes.
Your button's gone off, sorry. Sometimes they do that.
But about 2/3 of R&D in Europe is either being performed or financed by business, so let's also look from that perspective. And open access to scientific publications is not so much an issue. We see the point, and that's workable, as has been shown in the pilot in FP7. Open access to research data could be another issue. First of all, it's not very clear what is really meant. Is it open access to all publicly funded research, even if only part is publicly funded, the other part financed by or performed by business? You can imagine talking about incentives.
Okay. Very briefly, sorry, I need to press you.
Business would have a problem in investing in R&D if it knows that all results have to be widely available.
So let us not forget that element.
Yes.
when we
So
look at
sometimes
this.
it's good, sometimes there are reservations.
Okay, thank you very much, and thank you for bringing that element in. Any other burning points? Okay, let us go back to our panel. You've been faithful to your groups and told us what they thought. Now you get a chance to tell me what you think, and I'll do it this time, Thomas, first. Your own personal priority, would it be, and it doesn't have to be in the area of your group, broadly, to make open science really work, to take advantage of the potential, to meet the challenges, whether they be for scientists or business? What's your personal priority?
Well, what I've been noticing is that over the past 5-10 years, there's these impressive number of young startups that are building these tools, these very innovative digital tools, to enable researchers to actually adopt these open science practices. And I feel like they're the real drivers of this transition towards open science. They're the origin of the innovation of how the business model and how the user interfaces and how open science is going to look like in 20 years from now. So I think really the European Union and all the stakeholders should think about how we can support this ecosystem of young startups of the digital science kind of industry.
Thank you. And that is an issue we will come back to. We're going to talk about framework conditions for research and innovation and that link between innovation and growth and innovative startups in tomorrow's session. So thank you for making the link to tomorrow so beautifully. Sandra.
I really want to see this happen. In my generation, I want to see this change. I want to see it work. I suppose I think about very small, practical things that the research community, and again, thinking of the academic community primarily, what would change behaviour? Because it's easier to change technology than to change culture and behaviour. So I thought some of the things we talked about was, let's say what open science is. So let's give it, like, say, 10 bullets, this idea of compliance. Let's get it into evaluation criteria, into proposals, let's publish it, let's review it, let's be tough on reviewing it, peer reviewing it, that people are doing it and carrying it out. I think of the impact that H-index has on career progression. If we could do that for open science, for open data, we could change with absolutely the course of 5 years, change the way scientists do their science, and particularly the younger generation. I love this idea of compliance. We'd say I'm open science. Me as a person, I'm open science compliant. My project is open science compliant. I love it. And the last one, I suppose, is to be realistic about the costs, because we started to talk about it, but we didn't solve it. And if people in their proposals quantified or had to put some thought into what it actually costs to be open science, then that would change the way people act.
Okay, thank you very much. Stefan, you have the last word, sir.
Wow. So I would go back to 2 weeks ago. I was in Nancy attending the final of my thesis in 180 seconds. And there were 900 people in that room. It was jam-packed. The vast majority of them were not scientists. It was incredible how they were all flabbergasted by those young scientists who were telling them about their thesis. I think we need more of this. We need more citizen science, because I think that the reason I'm into this is because of Europe and because of science. And I think science can be the reconnect, actually, between Europe and the vision we want to have about Europe. So I would urge for being very careful about making sure we involve citizens.
Thank you very much. Ladies and gentlemen, will you join me in thanking our rapporteurs and indeed the moderators and speakers in all three sessions very much. You get to go and return to the comfy seats now. Thank you so much for your sterling effort.